temperature. Could mean big speeds once again at Michigan. But one of the things that they have done is a new rules package for here at Michigan, similar to what we saw at Indianapolis about 4 weeks ago. Now we have brought that new high drag package to Michigan. We'll see how it affects the cars around this racetrack as we see everyone making their way out on the track, working their way up to speed. And Jeff Burton, I've always been amazed at how you drivers can get behind the wheel of a car and the very first thing you do is go wide open and your first lap will be your fastest.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about this is nobody really knows what to expect. You know, you've come to Michigan a lot of times, but never with any package like this. So driving into turn one the first time, you're trying to collect a lot of data. You know, they kind of wait a little bit to get up to speed just to blend in. But you see Dale Earnhardt Jr., he's going to drive into turn three at full speed, and he's going to figure out what his car is doing. That is the only way you can do it. So he hope it sticks. I hope it goes where he wants it to go, but you really won't know until you start it at full speed.
And again, I mentioned it's a new rules package that we have. It's very similar to what we saw at Indianapolis. Steve, talk us through what they've done to these cars.
Yeah, well, basically for this weekend in Michigan, just like in Indianapolis, NASCAR's wanted to go with a high drag package. So how do you accomplish that? Well, the first thing they did is they extended the bumper closer to the ground. That creates a bunch of drag, but that also loses a bunch of downforce. So what do we have to do to go with that? We increased the spoiler height, and we also made a wider pan. Jeff, we made all these changes to the car. What was the goal in mind?
Well, the goal was quite simply, if you're the second car, the air goes way above your car, and it enables you to pull up. So down the straightaway, you have an advantage. It's trying to give the guy in second an advantage rather than always having a disadvantage because you lose the downforce in the corner. So we can see here at Indy, there were a lot of times where we saw cars pushing other cars. Didn't quite have the result that they wanted at Indy, but this racetrack is different. It's a multi-groove track, and that's going to give the drivers an option to go different places.
That's absolutely right. All these passes you see in Indianapolis right here, you see Denny Hamlin passing Jamie McMurray. Well, Jamie McMurray has to get back in line because of the 90-degree corners of Indianapolis. It's very single groove. Well, now we're here at Michigan. You're on board with Dale Earnhardt Jr. As he runs down into turn three right here, you're going to look at all the options he has. He can run right at the bottom against the white line. He could run the middle of the racetrack. Dale's choosing to run right against the white line. But he could also, he's not going to come in.
And he's also going to go into the garage now.
That's how it works. Man, listen, buddy, we had this rehearsed. He didn't listen. He was supposed to run a whole other lap. But there's three different ways to get around here. You can run against the white line. You can run the middle. And we haven't seen it get all the way to the wall, Jeff. But as we talk to some of these competitors, they believe that this track could widen out with this new package.
Yeah, no question. And that is we for years have heard the drivers complaining about an aero push. And here you see three cars running together. They've talked about an aero push, how when you get into the corner, you lose the front of your car. We've got a caution for some reason.
Early, a little bit of debris on the backstretch.
Red's out right here. Red's out.
They will make sure to get that off of the racetrack.
So you've always lost downforce in the corner. And so the trailing car has always been disadvantaged. So with this package, you're going to lose that downforce and more in the corner. But the goal is to hopefully gain more than you lost by a reduction in drag down the straightaway. So hopefully the trailing car can catch the car that's in front because he has less drag on the straightaway. Then when he gets to the corner, he doesn't have to run behind the other car because we have multiple grooves. He can run below him. He can run above him. He doesn't have to run right behind him and not get the disadvantage from having the high drag. So that's the hope that NASCAR has in this package. They don't really know. I mean, you can test, you can try, but what we learned at Indy is the only way to really find out is go race.
And ultimately, as you mentioned, the goal is to bring the cars a little bit closer together. Might not have worked exactly how they wanted it to work in Indianapolis. Does it have a better chance of working here just because of the configuration? As you
Absolutely.
The long sweeping corners.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the goal is for the trailing car to not be at such a disadvantage. Well, how do you do that? At a track that you're on the throttle 80 or 90% of the time, the only way I think you can do that is to draft. You're always going to be at a downforce disadvantage, so the draft is definitely the advantage.
And let's be clear, Indy wasn't worse than other races at Indy.
No, you're right.
Right?
Right.
There was this high expectation going into Indy that it was going to be something way better than we'd seen. I didn't think it was worse. I just didn't think it moved the ball. I didn't think that it really changed anything. So, a lot of people said, well, after Indy, they should have thrown this idea away because it wasn't an improvement at Indy, but this isn't Indy. This is Michigan.
Yeah, totally.
And by the way, this track is similar to California. This track is similar to some other racetracks we go to. So it's worth continuing down the road, finish the test to find out if it actually is better or not.
Let's go into the garage and Kelly Stavison.
A little bit of breaking news, Rick. You see the 43 car has just pulled in after making a few laps, but it is not Eric Almirola behind the wheel. It is Camping World truck driver Matt Crafton doing duties for Eric. Eric's a bit under the weather. Something came over him late yesterday afternoon into the evening. They think it's just hopefully a stomach virus. They're hoping it's going to be one of those 24-hour deals, but Eric's actually in the care center right now. The plan is obviously for Matt Crafton to go out here during practice and do his best to get this car set up. Eric's going to attempt to come out and make a couple of laps so that he can then qualify the car later on this afternoon. They'll take it from there as to what the plan is for tomorrow. Right now, though, it'll be primarily Matt Crafton. Like I said, Eric Almirola has to at least complete a lap here in practice to be eligible to qualify the car later, so they're hoping he'll feel well enough to turn a couple laps at some point during this 2.5-hour practice.
And we hope Eric feels better, obviously, and able to get back out behind the wheel of the 43 as they pick up the debris on the backstretch. The green flag will come back out again when we return. NASCAR Mobile is the best way to follow your favorite drivers. You can build your own leaderboard, watch live in-car cameras, listen to driver in-car audio. All you have to do is go to NASCAR.com/mobile. Debris picked up on the backstretch. They're about to let the cars roll off of pit road. To get a full understanding of the drag package, the high drag package, don't you need multiple cars running together on the track? And we don't normally see that early in practice as guys want to go out and see what they have in their car.
Well, I think it's always best to understand what you have by yourself first. You need to tune on your car, get it where it drives the way you want to drive, and then try to find a way to get with other cars. So rarely do we see cars running together early in practice unless they left pit road together and really didn't have a chance. You need a baseline. You need something from which to work off of the rest of the day. And if you're in traffic all the time, then your car is always changing. So you first need to gather the baseline.
It was at Indianapolis with this high drag package that a lot of drivers got overheated. Not only the cars a little bit of heat, but the drivers especially.
Yeah, one thing that this package does do, Rick, is it breaks the cars run hotter. As the tail is extended closer to the ground, the air underneath these cars is not moving anywhere near as fast, not evacuating the air, keeping the cockpit cool. You see here, race winner Kyle Busch he was hot. He was cooked. We actually put a thermometer in Casey Mears' car. You see here it's 127 degrees, 133 degrees, still going up. It's 142 degrees in the cockpit. I mean, it's tough enough to drive one of these race cars, Mike, but to do it at 142 degree temperature, got to make it even more difficult.
I can't deal with 85 degrees, let alone 142. NASCAR realized that was a situation they needed to address. So this week they came out with a new addendum to their rules package, and that includes extra NACA ducts on the right side of the car, up front near the A post. There's 2 holes, 2 ducts that will lead to airflow that brings the hoses right to the driver's seat. So the idea is to cool the driver a little bit more and hope prevent any overheating issues. I think it's a great idea. I would imagine you guys do too as well. Especially you, Jeff. You've been in pretty hot race cars before.
I am a 100% believer in that rule, and I'm going to tell you why. Because the crew chiefs won't do it. It wasn't that they couldn't do that. That was legal. You could run those NACA ducts prior, but they didn't want to do it because aerodynamically it's a disadvantage. So when the driver comes in and says, "Hey, Steve, I'm hot," Steve says, "We'll find a way not to be hot."
Yeah.
He doesn't say, "Well, we'll do this for you, we'll do this for you." So this is NASCAR's way of saying, "Okay, crew chiefs, you don't want to help them out, then we'll make you help them."
We're competitive people. Sometimes we have to be safe from ourselves. So NASCAR kind of stepped in, and I do agree. I think it's a good idea. But listen, it's not just the driver. We're going to talk about this all weekend long, even in these overcast conditions. The driver might be able to get a little bit more air with some NACA ducts, but as I walk through the garage, there's some concern with mechanical failures. I mean, when you look at the engine, on board here with Joey Logano, if you listen to his throttle trace, he is going to be in the throttle more around Michigan than any other probably downforce track we go to. And what's different here than Daytona and Talladega, where they run wide open all the way around here, is this is a different engine package. Look at the RPMs, 9,000 RPMs. At Daytona, you turn about 8,000 RPMs. So that engine is working way harder here.
And he never got all the way out of the throttle. So that's one thing these teams are trying to figure out. How much throttle is the driver going to use with this package? This package doesn't make much more downforce. It may even make a little less downforce. But what it does is got the car going slower down the straightaway because of, I say slower, it's still 198 miles an hour, because it makes so much drag. Because it's going slower, the driver can drive the car harder. So a lot of unknowns in this. How hard is a driver going to be able to drive? And to Steve's point, the more you're in the throttle, and Michigan is famous for breaking engines. The more you're in the throttle, the longer you're in those high RPM ranges, the more apt you are to break parts.
And how about being a substitute driver? When Eric Almirola is under the weather, you've got to fill in for the driver of the 43, and I believe you caught up with him, Kelly.
Have Matt Crafton now out of the 43. You turned the initial laps for it this weekend. But tell me from your perspective, how did this come together? When did you get the call?
I was about 9:30 last night. They called me and told me Eric was under the weather. So it's great to be on top of that call list to be able to jump in one of these cars. But I said, without a doubt, an honor. We ran one lap and it was really, really loose. So hope we can get this thing tightened up and get some speed built in it for Eric later.
What is it like as a driver coming into this car that you don't have time in and running the first hot laps?
Oh, it's definitely different. But I said a lot of them it's unknown for it because of the new aero package that they have, so nobody knows anything about it. And they thought the car would be tight, but I don't think everybody's fighting rural tight right now. So we'll keep working on it.
All right, thank you, Matt. And Matt, of course, also running here in the Camping World Truck Series this weekend.
Yeah, the reason he's at the top of the list as far as filling in is he's already won 3 truck races this year. He's a back-to-back defending champion in the Camping World Truck Series, and he's versatile. He can get behind the wheel of an Xfinity car or behind the wheel of a Cup car and give great feedback to these crew chiefs and teams.
Yeah, we've seen him suffer Paul Menard in the past. We've seen him be successful in the Truck Series, as you mentioned. So he's a guy that has some experience, and also you have to remember the trucks make a lot of drag too. You know, and so that package is a little bit like the truck package. Not like it, but it's a little bit similar.
Kyle Larson coming into Michigan on the outside of the top 16 in the chase. Would need a win to get into the chase for the Sprint Cup. It might be this track that gives him that best opportunity.
It's always a fun part of the weekend, I think, when all the teams have worked so hard to try to understand what their car is going to do, to try to prepare the best they can, to give the driver the best car they can, and then they drop the green flag, and now you're dealing with an issue you didn't think you were going to be dealing with. I'm too loose. I'm too tight. You know, you didn't unload the car thinking you were wrong. You unloaded the car thinking you were 100% right. The teams that can deal with those issues and make the best changes throughout today, those are the teams that are going to have the best chance to win on Sunday. Races are won. They drop the checkered flag on Sunday, but the guys that do the best job on Friday and Saturday, they give themselves the best chance to get that checkered flag on Sunday.
Tony Stewart coming off mechanical failure from a week ago at Watkins Glen. Also the news that a civil lawsuit was filed against him by the family of Kevin Ward Jr. Actually, the parents of Kevin Ward Jr. were on the Good Morning America show today discussing that incident that took place a little over a year ago. Kevin Ward Jr. lost his life in a dirt track. And so that obviously weighing on Tony Stewart's mind as he comes here to Michigan, trying to continue to find speed, which is working out fairly well early in this session. Second quickest is Tony Stewart behind Carl Edwards in this practice session. Again, it'll be a 2.5-hour practice session. One of the unique things about this practice session, Steve, that's different from Indianapolis is they don't have the ability to acquire data. And that's what they had at Indianapolis, was that data acquisition where they could bring in the computers and all the engineers and figure out exactly what this package did. They don't have all of that this week.
Yeah, that's really a big change. You know, while NASCAR did extend the practice today to 2.5 hours from our normal 90 minutes we would have on a Friday, the fact that these crew chiefs and engineers don't have their data acquisition system on, there's going to make this a much more difficult task of trying to figure out this new package. When we went to Indianapolis, these teams brought all the engineers, Jeff. They were everywhere, and they were there because they had a lot to look at. You see here tables and tables of engineers looking at information, diagnosing the data, what they need on their race car. And they had all these different sensors. There's a sensor on the 22 of Joey Logano. Right here, Kyle Larson, you see he has sensors across the splitter and that big antenna on the roof measuring wind speed. All of these different things educate the teams and the crew chief on what they have and what they need to do to make it better. But Kelly, here this weekend, it's just a stopwatch, some lap times, and a race car driver.
Yeah, it's old school, or as Rodney Childers told me, just like any other weekend. He actually said he didn't think it was that big of a deal. Then again, the guy just won a championship. He's locked into the chase. So what do they have to worry about? But he said it's really just going back like you would at any other track. They'll use photos to look at the car in the corner, see where the splitter is, and then just go to work on it, changing springs, messing with the track bar. So Rodney said it wasn't really a big concern from his end. It was just more of a typical weekend where maybe Indy was not typical.
And one of the things that isn't typical is the speeds that they're running here at Michigan. They're actually 16 miles per hour off the track record, which was set this race last year. Still over 190 miles an hour for Edwards. Mob Steel premieres Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern on NBCSN, where classic cars become modern street machines. Mob Steel works to rebuild Detroit one classic car at a time. Mob Steel premieres Sunday at 6 Eastern after NASCAR on NBCSN. Mike Massaro.
Hey, Rick, you know, a lot of attention is being paid to Kyle Busch, but maybe Kurt should be getting a little bit of attention, too. Let's take into consideration some of the facts here. Kurt missed the first 3 races, yet he finds himself 8th in points. He's ahead of some very big names, guys like Denny Hamlin, Jeff Gordon, Carl Edwards, guys who have all run the full schedule, yet Kurt is on a roll himself. In fact, he comes back here after a win here in June, looking to sweep the Michigan races. Right now, they're trying to dial the car in, but at the moment, not completely perfect. This is what he said after the last run.
The whole car doesn't feel like it's squatting down far enough yet. It might be hitting your travels properly, but it doesn't feel like I'm in the stops the right way. But that might be providing us the grip by not being loaded up too much into the stops.
And you see Tony Gibson now leaning in to talk with his driver to get a little better understanding of what was going on. The team, meanwhile, making some changes, in particular rear spring changes. That's the one thing I did notice, but they are far from done, it seems like, as they make even more significant tweaks on this car before they go back out, guys.
And so you see the 41 and the practice crash back in June. Making the change over, getting the backup out. And of course the rain comes at Michigan. And the celebration begins. Now they've got a new race package that they have to deal with here with the high drag. We see Kyle Busch working by Paul Menard.
Yeah, I mean, we have to remember today, it's only Friday. We still have practices tomorrow for these Sprint Cup teams. So there's going to have to be a balance. These teams are going to have to play. Even with 2.5 hours, Jeff, you have to decide, look, how much are we going to stay in race trim? Because here later this evening, we're going to set this field by qualifying. And, you know, while Michigan is wide, track position is important at every racetrack we go to, so qualifying is going to be very important.
And I think that gets even more difficult on a weekend like this with this rule change, because all the teams come here with a list of things they want to try. You know, what drives the best? Here's what looks better in the wind tunnel, but what drives the best? And the only way to go do that is to go through a lot of changes. So I think it's made harder this weekend because it is a long time, but at the same time, you got to, like you just said, you got to qualify, and qualifying matters, track position matters.
Sure.
So the more changes that NASCAR makes, the more opportunity for the teams to learn things. And so when you get done today, the fastest car is going to want to have made 5 or 6 more runs because there's more stuff on their list that they wanted to go through. So when do you stop trying to learn and go into qualifying?
And now, I mean, currently P1, Tony Stewart in this 14 car, they seem to have found some speed. He's fastest right now at a 37.85. It looks good. He's kind of moved up the racetrack a little bit there. I don't know if it was by choice or he kind of chased it up there. But, you know, when we talk about changes, Jeff, you know, it's easy to say these teams are going to search for speed. They're going to do changes. But what are they going to change? Well, it's the same physical race car. So the front geometries you expect to be relatively close to what you have run. But we heard Mike Massaro report that he's seen a lot of rear spring changes, especially on that 41. That's an area of the race car I expect these teams to work on. When we talk about attitude of the race car, the front splitter needs to be on the ground or just off the ground, as close to it as you can get without dragging. But how high do you want the back of this car? It's really simple. If this spoiler is making all this downforce, It's the sail. It's the rear sail in the back of Carl Edwards' car, that big, tall 9-inch spoiler. Well, how high in the air do you want it? They can put stiffer rear springs or raise the back of the car and stick that spoiler up into the air. Look at that, Jeff, driving one-handed.
Easy for him to do. What was he reaching down there for, Jeff?
Well, I wonder if he's messing
reaching
with,
back for
I wonder if he's changing the ducts, like opening the NACA ducts, shutting the NACA ducts, trying to learn if it makes a difference to how the car drives. That's the only thing I'm not really sure of.
And those are the things we talk about. So when we talk about the height of the rear of the back of the car, you know, the higher you put, it's real simple. You put the car up in the air, you're going to make more downforce. You're also going to make more drag. You drop the car out of the air, you're going to make less downforce, but you're going to make less drag. Well, somewhere there's that balance, Jeff, because unlike Daytona and Talladega, where it's wide open easily, I could run wide open around Daytona. I'm pretty confident I'm not running wide open around here. Although Carl Edwards makes it look pretty easy, he's fighting to stay wide open.
Back in 2012, they resurfaced, repaved this facility, and it's fairly flat and smooth. And we've seen some incredible speeds, over 205 miles an hour here. But I'm curious, with this new package, with this new rules package, you want to seal the car to the ground as low as you can. We're hearing guys changing rear springs. Is that to try to get as much of that wicker bill and that spoiler out of the air because that's slowing them down?
Well, one thing that's very different, we talk about Michigan not being Indianapolis. We can talk about the width and the size at 2 miles, but there's one major difference, and that's the banking. Indianapolis is a very flat racetrack, so at what height you set your car down the straightaway, it stays reasonably close to that height through the corner. Other than the aerodynamics pushing down on the car, there's not a lot of travel. Well, the 22 car, as he drives off into the corner right here, you see the back of the car squat to the racetrack. Well, that's because there's banking. As he drives into that banking, physics take over and they squish that car into the racetrack. That's very different than Indianapolis. So when we talk about no data and having to work on this package, you would change rear springs to try to get the straightaways and the corners closer. You want them closer to the same height.
Every car has its optimum performing stance. It wants to be a certain height off the racetrack. Okay, what the teams have learned with the other package, what we normally have been running in 2015, is they want to seal everything off. They want the back of the car a certain elevation, all the side skirts sealed off, the quarter panels low to the ground. That makes optimum downforce. But when you add as much spoiler as you've added and you put that wicker on the top of that spoiler, well, guess what? It may want something different.
Right.
So now the teams are having to go experiment and try to figure out exactly what the car wants.
So that experimentation continues here at Michigan International Speedway as Tony Stewart continues to be the fastest here at this 2-mile higher banks racetrack. Formula One is on NBCSN next Sunday, August 23rd for Belgium. The circuit's longest track is certainly going to challenge the field. Catch the Formula One Belgium Grand Prix. That's next Sunday, August 23rd on NBCSN. Riding along with Kevin Harvick.
I want to listen. I want to know how much they're getting out of the gas here.
He's coming in.
Of course he's coming in.
You're the magic touch today.
If we want anybody, if the fans at home want anybody to come off the racetrack, just let me know because we'll put them on camera and then they quit. So,
well, listen in.
Actually, it's only if you talk about it.
It's only if I talk about
it. Camera. It's just if you talk about it.
Oh, okay.
Just to clarify.
Kevin Harvick, 5th quickest in this first practice. The 3 of Austin Dillon. He is currently 15th. He's run 7 laps, the most laps that have been run at this point.
He just moved up to 7th. We've seen almost every time these cars go out, they actually run faster, and that's a little bit of this tire, no doubt about it. It's also the team's learning, but this tire we've seen in the past, every time they go out, they seem to run a little bit quicker. So Austin Dillon's running his fastest lap on his 9th lap. Pretty much everybody on the board is running their fastest lap the last time they went out.
Yeah, and while that frustrates some for the race because it's going to be really about fuel management, track position, because the tires don't fall off, so there's not a big value to come get tires. What that's going to make for a spectacular event is qualifying later today, because that tells me that teams can go out, make a run, come in, and for the second round, because now remember, we're going to have single car qualifying. These guys are only going to get one shot at the top 12 moving forward. But what that tells me is when we advance the top 12 into round 2, those guys I expect to all run faster than they did in round one. So perhaps you don't know who's going to end up with the fastest car at the end of the day.
We were seeing the RCR cars 7th, 27th, 25th. Let's talk about Austin Dillon and his team for a little bit. They have shown a big, in my opinion, they've shown a big improvement in performance the last month. They have run much better. They've qualified better. They've raced better. That team is starting to really be a part of RCR. When I say that, what I mean is that when all the teams run well, they can all help each other. But when one team isn't running well, it's hard for that team to help the others. Well, now Austin Dillon in the 3-car, they've turned into the team that other teams at RCR are saying, hey, what are you doing? Why, and that's good. That's what a company needs to improve. So I think the 3-car is really, he's starting to show what we've seen him do in the trucks and the Xfinity Series. He's starting to show that some in the Cup. We hadn't really seen that before, but it's starting to come out with this 3-car.
Yeah, and they've had some change in personnel at RCR over this course of this year. They've swapped around some of the crew chiefs to try to promote some of that. And that is an example, in my opinion, Jeff, that's an example of they're all smart guys. They didn't move anybody around or let anybody go. What they did is they came out and they said at Sonoma they were going to rearrange the crew chiefs. Slugger Labby began to work with Austin, and I think that's what it takes, maybe a different voice on the radio. It's the same information, it's the same company. Just how do you apply it that perhaps gets you better results? Another team that did that earlier this year was Michael Waltrip Racing. The 15 and the 50Y swapped crew chiefs.
And if you don't mind, I'm going to say this, and let's see if it works. Let's ride along with Clint, and let's see how much he's in the throttle. If this works, I'm not going to let you hear the end of it.
That's fine. I'll take the practice off. I'll go down to the garage and see what they're changing.
I'd say he's in the throttle a lot.
Absolutely.
Never all the way out of the throttle.
Now, every time I've been to Michigan, 3 and 4 has always been the trouble spot for me. It's much tighter than 1 and 2. I like to see if it's different for him down here. See, and that's why I couldn't drive, Rick, because when I got to the corner, I'd lift. There's no way I would think, I'm just going to ride through here basically wide open. And remember, we're still in race trim. Wait till this afternoon when these guys tape up the grill and put in qualifying trim. I think you're right, Rick. It's going to be about trimming the car out because they're going to be wide open. And
watch the miles per hour. It's 195. It only goes down to 186. But think about that. That is an example of how the drag is not allowing the car on the straightaway to gain a lot of speed, okay? I say only 195. 196. It doesn't continue to build. It gets to 195, 196. It kind of stops. It's only slowing down to 184 miles an hour. Now that is a small amount of decrease in speed from the corner to the straightaway. That's part of what this package is about.
And what I'm going to be interested to see is as we see this car out the front windshield in the 15 of Clint Boyer, are we going to see faster than 196? If he's able to close in on that car, are we going to see that draft take part and let him have a higher top speed down the straightaway?
The other thing of interest is watch on the left the RPMs. Okay, watch how much it builds. See right here, it kind of quits building speed. It builds speed, but not at the rate you would expect.
198 that time and closing the gap with the car in front of him.
Then that's the idea. And he was still 15 or 20 car lengths back. So even at that distance, Jeff, we saw 2 miles an hour more out of the 15 car than we had saw consistently 2 or 3 laps before. But what I want to know, Jeff, where do you find a half a second? Because that last lap was a 38 flat, and he's about wide open. And I see Tony Stewart fastest at a 37.58. So is that half a second in car performance, or did Tony Stewart get a tow? Is that half a second perhaps in help?
Well, that conversation that we're having right now, that's going on in the garage too. Okay, we're half a second off. How's the car drive? Hey, car drives really good in the gas almost all the way around the racetrack. Okay, then we got to trim this thing out. We got to get it. We got to get the car down. We got to get the spoiler out of the air. We got to try to find a way to generate some more speed. Let's try that now, see how it drives. Because listen, you might can beat P1 on the board today, but when they put 42 other cars on the racetrack, that doesn't mean that's what you need in race trim. You may need something in race trim that doesn't make as much speed as what we have in qualifying. They don't know that yet. They're trying to learn that today and tomorrow going into Sunday.
And another thing this package really does is you see the 48 of Jimmy Johnson, multiple wins on the season in the chase. They're already looking ahead to the championship run, trying to advance their way through the chase. Is Michigan in the past always used to be a track that you would circle and say, I'm going to build a new package, I'm going to bring a new chassis, I'm going to try some new stuff. This was a great track that you had to come here twice a year, you have a great notebook. Let's try our new package here to see if that's what we want to race when we come to the chase. Well, now we have this high drag package. So a team like the 48, this is kind of a one-off race. This is a win-or-nothing race because there is nothing they're going to learn, assuming we don't run this package in the chase, which I've yet to hear any buzz or any word of. So assuming that's not the case, this is just a one-off. This is them showing up with their ego and their sponsor trying to win a race and do the best for their team, because this is not preparing them moving forward.
Let's go back into the garage and Mike Massaro.
And Rick, you talk about learning stuff. Well, every team in here is trying to figure out how their car is in traffic, how it is in clean air, and Kurt Busch is no different. Just because he won here back in June doesn't mean his car is reacting exactly the same way with this new aero package. And right now they're just trying to determine what is the best use of their time here in the rest of this practice.
The track is starting to get to the point where there's enough grip and consistency in it to know what we have. Now we're at the point of heading into the fork in the road of dialing the car in for speed by itself or making sure we're stable in traffic, because it's going to take two different packages.
So obviously it's decision time for Tony Gibson and this team, as it is for every crew chief in this garage, Steve. They just got to try to figure out what's most important and what they need to really focus on in the next hour and 45 minutes.
You know, Mike, that's one of the toughest decisions you make. It's so easy to say, we're going to start in race trim, run for 45 minutes, get swapped over. Sounds like a great plan. But then you get running in race trim, the car's not quite as good as you want, and you get sucked into this quicksand of, well, we got to make it better, we got to make it better, we got to make it better. Next thing you know, you look up, you have 45 minutes left in practice, not enough time. Now you got to halfway switch to qualifying trim, and you have mismanaged 2.5 hours of practice.
And you heard Kurt made reference to it's going to take two different packages. And that's what we were talking about earlier, is that top speed, Denny Hamlin just went to P1, ran 190, almost 192 miles an hour. Well, that's great, but is that the package you want to race with? And that's what Kurt was talking about. He believes it's going to be two completely different packages from qualifying to racing.
Yeah, and we talk about all these top speeds coming from help or whatever. Well, we see Jeff Gordon right here running laps. There's really nobody around him. Well, Denny Hamlin has a clear track in front of him as well. He's ran a 36 or 37.50. This last lap was a 37.60, which is good for P3 on the board, and there's no one on the whole straightaway on either side of him. So that tells me that it's not just the draft. He has a good handling race car.
He's fastest on the racetrack. Denny Hamlin goes 37.535 on his 18th lap. So speed's continuing to pick up. They're finding speed here at Michigan. Kevin Harvick, 6th quick. There's your top 10. Get the ultimate pass to every moment. Sunday's NASCAR Sprint Cup Series race here at Michigan with Race Buddy. You choose from multiple HD feeds of the different drivers or follow the race action with a live leaderboard. All you have to do is tune in at NASCAR.com/Race Buddy. Speed's continuing to pick up from Michigan International Speedway, with the exception of this car. The 16 of Greg Biffle was out on the track for one lap. Now he's back out there for, looks like his second lap, but only 40th quick.
Yeah, but that's a little unfair for Greg Biffle because these are the first cars that have been on the racetrack this weekend. So this track has continued to pick up speed. So he only ran one lap when the track wasn't really gripped up like it is now. So I think to be fair and see where the 16 really stacks up on speed, we have to follow along here and see what kind of laps we put up. Now, I am concerned that they only ran one lap. I mean, why have they only ran one lap when Denny Hamlin, who's at the top of the board, has run 23 laps? So there's obviously parts and pieces they didn't like right away in practice. But that's what a 2.5 hour practice affords you, is the opportunity to go out and run multiple laps. See there, you see in his first lap back on track, he's up to 26, and I would expect him, as odd as this sounds, to continue to run faster. This race tire is so hard, Jeff. You know, it's kind of like on razor's edge. Until it gets heated up, you start to build confidence in it.
That's right. Biffle has 4 wins here in the Cup Series, so he's really good at this racetrack. He knows what he's looking for. He knows the feel he needs. So this is one of his favorite racetracks. Every time he goes out, he's going to go faster because of this tire. So I agree. We can't really judge where they are just yet. They're behind the 8 ball trying to catch up because of whatever issue they had when it first started.
And we heard him get out of the throttle. They're coming out of 4. And you see how that affects him. He won't even get to 193 miles an hour into turn 1. He gets just to it. So getting out of the gas killed him on that front stretch speed.
Yeah, we see here Greg Biffle's teammate Ricky Stenhouse Jr., another Roush Fenway car trying to find that speed. But you're absolutely right, Rick. This high drag package, momentum is really the word. I want to say corner exit, but when you're barely out of the gas, the whole corner is the exit. I mean, you're not out of the gas, on the brakes, and then back in the gas. I mean, Ricky Stenhouse rolls down to the corner, barely breathes it, and he's right back in the gas. Any issue from when you commit back to the throttle, out here by the wall, anytime if you have to just blip the throttle or touch the brakes, that's going to pay a penalty down the entire straightaway. And you see here, Roush Fenway Racing, we documented this, and we talked to Jimmy Fenning in the garage. They're working night and day. Like he says, what do you say, Jeff? He doesn't sleep well because he wants to fix this. It's not lack of effort. It's just very hard. This is a tough sport, and when you get behind it, it is man, it's a battle.
And this is so uncharacteristic of Roush Fenway Racing. I mean, they are 24th, 26th, and 28th as far as on the speed chart. This is a racetrack that Jack Roush, when he comes to Michigan, he expects to win.
23 wins here.
They've won 23 times here.
I bet you have some.
This is the backyard. This is the backyard of Ford for Jack Roush. He considers this one of the most marquee races to win because he wants to win for his manufacturer here in their backyard.
I spent some time with Jack Roush last week, and he is insistent that Roush Fenway Racing will be back at the top. He told me, he looked me dead in the eye and said, Jeff, every company, every organization in the world goes through down times, and we are without a doubt in one right now. I promise you, we will get back. And he told me he is committed to getting it back. He's dedicated the resources to getting it back. He made me a believer. After talking to Jack, he insisted that they're doing what it takes, and I believe him. I know Jack Roush. He's an exceptionally competitive person, extremely smart person, and he is committed to getting it back. When he looked me in the eye with the way he did, I believe what he's telling me.
So Martin Truex Jr. out on track. He is 17th quickest in this first practice session. It's a 2.5-hour practice session. Started at 11 o'clock. Will end at 1:30. Let's go back in the garage and Mike.
You know, Rick, we've been talking all day about this new rules package and how it was introduced in Indianapolis. Now, it's one thing if you're a powerhouse team like a Hendrick Motorsports or a Penske Racing, but what if you're a smaller team like Tommy Baldwin Racing? Tommy, what's this like, having to adapt to this rule change mid-season?
Well, I mean, obviously we had our first go-around at Indy, and we knew this place versus there was going to be a lot different. You know, we're expecting a lot of craziness on Sunday, and basically today is a test session for us. You know, we got to just go through a bunch of different packages. It's the only way we're going to learn because we don't have all the tools back at the shop, as many tools as most teams do. So we'll try a couple, 2, 3 different packages here, pick the best one out of those packages to go back to that one, whatever one it might be, and then continue working on to try to get speed.
When it comes to competing with the bigger teams, when something like this occurs, how are you able to keep up?
Well, it takes, obviously, us a little bit longer. You know, I call it the food chain effect, to get the information, what's going on out there. But, you know, our guys, we've been working pretty hard lately. And, you know, these cars have been running pretty good and, for the money that we have and the funding that we have. And we got a lot of good things coming up in the future, a lot of good announcements coming up. So we're excited, and hopefully we can have a good weekend.
What are those announcements?
You'll know.
We tried, guys. We tried.
That's the way it normally happens.
You know, Tommy Baldwin is one of the smartest people in the garage. And, you know, when a guy like Tommy raises his hand and says, I want to be a car owner, that's a great thing. The fact that these teams come out and give 100%. They don't have the funding Hendrick does, or Roush, or Childress, but they do everything they can the best way they possibly know how. I mean, Tommy Baldwin's won 5 times as a crew chief in the Cup Series, okay? He won the pole here with my brother Ward. So he knows what he's doing.
Right.
He needs a chance. He's taking a small team and trying to grow it in. He's trying to be Rick Hendrick. That's what his goal is, and that our sport needs people like that.
Yeah, I mean, here's another smaller team, you know, the 33 car. They're trying to go out. You see the hood's blank. Quarter panels are blank. You know, the owners have to invest time and money to keep this car on the racetrack. And cars like this fill the field out. You know, you don't have a full field of racing if all of these owners don't commit and come week in and week out.
Another smaller team, Matt DiBenedetto, out on the track in the 83. Will be making his 20th career Cup Series start on Sunday. Welcome back to Michigan, as we are under our first practice for the Sprint Cup Series, presented by DraftKings. How about the Miller Genuine Draft number 2? No, Rusty Wallace is not behind the wheel, but that's the old paint scheme that we used to see Rusty behind the wheel of that number 2, and there's a reason that it is painted this way and looks this way. It is Rusty Wallace's birthday today. He turns 59, the Hall of Famer, turning 59 today, and Penske and the 2 team are giving a little bit of a birthday present on the track.
I'm having flashbacks. I mean, that's the 2 that I'm. I know we talk about the Blue Deuce, and he ran that for a long time.
Yeah.
But this black and gold number 2, man, I've seen that a lot of times racing against it on the racetrack. Man, he was dominant in this paint scheme.
Rusty had 5 wins here. Brad, on the other hand, still looking for his first win at Michigan.
Yeah, you talk about wins. There's some guys out there that wins are the only thing on the horizon that these teams need. When we talk about the chase, and the chase for the playoffs are coming, you know, we see the points gap. Jamie McMurray, first guy without a win in 12th place. And then we have Paul Menard, Jeff Gordon. You see the gap. And why 50 points seems like a lot. We talk about this all the time, Jeff. Remember, win and you're in. So if Kyle Larson or Greg Biffle, Casey Kane, if they win a race and move that bump line up, next thing you know, everyone is really, really tight in points.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you're talking about 23 points separating the 4 guys. I'm sorry, the 5 guys that are in it. So 23 points. You just said it. Let's get Kyle Larson in. Let's give him a win. Now 23 points spread out over 4 or 5. That is nothing.
Right.
None of these guys. A few weeks ago, Jamie McMurray, Jeff Gordon, they were in good shape, man. They were way up in there. They felt great about themselves. A few bad races, and now they're nervous. They're not sleeping at night. So, without a doubt, this race between Jamie McMurray and Clint Boyer, it's going to be fascinating. One winner, whole new ball game.
Yeah, if you think about it, you look at the numbers. If Eric Almirola gets a win, that pushes everybody down a spot, which means Ryan Newman is ahead of the 17th spot by 1 point. Jeff Gordon would be ahead of the 17th spot by 8 points. 10 points for Paul Menard. I mean, it's that close if we get that one win.
And think about going to Richmond. If it stays like this, going to Richmond, and it's that close, and we got one guy can upset the whole field. The difference between making the chase and not making the chase could be one position on the last restart.
I wish that on no one. I've had more stressful nights in Richmond than I ever want to care to remember.
Let's go in the garage and Kelly.
Yeah, with one team who's certainly right in the thick of that battle, the 31 of Ryan Newman. I mean, how do you think he feels? He's got 1 point over that 16th and final spot right now, which is maybe why he's feeling a little bit frustrated. They're making a front spring change to try to help him out, but on his last run, Ryan just couldn't find the speed.
The drivetrain shaking a little bit after the gear change. First lap I noticed it the biggest, but I have no idea how I can go 9/10 of a second quicker. That was lifted sub and barely dragging a little bit of brake, but I'd have to be damn near wide open to do what those other guys are doing.
And earlier in this practice session, Ryan also noted something else. He said, something's different in my seat. It's hitting me here in the back. Might be in the upholstery. Now, Jeff, I know last week at the road course of Watkins Glen, driver comfort was a top priority. How important is it here at Michigan?
Oh, it's important everywhere, Kelly. It's
you can't ask a driver how important driver comfort is.
Perhaps the most important thing, Kelly.
Perhaps.
How is that Perrier up there in the booth?
It's a little too cold.
But you know what I saw when we saw that 31 in the garage, Jeff, is I saw him cutting some side skirt off. And you know what that tells me? That when they're complaining about speed and they're looking for more lap times, you see the 11 here. As he goes around the racetrack, you need to look at the side skirts on the 11. Those are the extensions of the side down towards the racetrack. They're a little bit hard to see on his car because of the color of them. But the distance from those side skirts to the racetrack, the backstretch is a great place to see it. You can see the whole left side of the race car. The length of that skirt tells me how far that car is traveling in the back. We talked about it at the top of the show. You want to try to go faster, lower the back of your race car. You're going to reduce downforce, but you're also going to reduce drag. It's one way to make lap time.
And Ryan Newman said it best. Ryan said, I have no idea how I'm going to go that much faster, meaning his car drove okay, right? I can't do anything that's going to make that much time difference. So he was saying, hey, we're going to have to find something in the car. Mike, you got something?
Yeah, I was just observing the 48 team as they made adjustments during this last stop in the garage, and the team was certainly going to work on the machine, but this team is completely efficient. There is no part of this team that is sitting down while it's in the garage, and that includes Jimmy Johnson. While the team was working on the car, making some adjustments, Johnson was intent, watching video, steely-eyed, very focused on what his line was around this racetrack. He just put his helmet back on, but you know that he was thinking about exactly what he just saw in that video before he goes back out on that racetrack, trying to maybe improve upon his line. I would imagine that's what he's looking at, Jeff. You've been there. You tell us.
Yeah, I think it's important to be looking at everything you can look at. You watch video of practice. You're watching other cars line. You have the ECU data where you can compare your driving styles to your teammates' driving styles. You have all the timing and scoring. So Jimmy Johnson, if you go to a test and you watch Jimmy Johnson, the way he conducts himself, you'll see a lot of drivers texting. You know, they're making sure that, you know, they're getting stuff done at home or whatever. Jimmy Johnson is cute. He is in with the team. He sits down with the engineers. He's studying data all the time. Jimmy Johnson is a professional to the highest degree. When he's at the racetrack, he focuses 100% on racing, testing, anything he can do to get better. That's what I really respect about Jimmy a great deal. 6-time champion, and he knows he needs to be better, and he's willing to put the work in to be better.
And he's pretty fit because he just did a sprint triathlon this last week into the triathlons. Tony Stewart is fastest once again. At the end of this practice for the Sprint Cup Series, it's Xfinity Series practice from Mid-Ohio. And then the Xfinity Series final practice from Mid-Ohio on NBC Live Extra. Sprint Cup Series qualifying will set the field for Sunday's race at 5 o'clock today. And then 7 o'clock, NASCAR America wraps it all up. It's a nice little bow on the day, both the Sprint Cup Series and the Xfinity Series. 2 different tracks this weekend. Kyle Busch, definitely one of the hottest drivers right now in the Sprint Cup Series. Once again, very close to getting another win. Over the past 6 races, 5-6 races, he has been up front and in contention to win every single one of them. Yeah, if he hasn't won.
They've done what they needed to do points-wise as well. Not only have they gotten wins, but they've climbed back into the, they've climbed back into the top 30 in points, and that's what they need to be. They were given a chase waiver by NASCAR, basically just saying, hey, you were out of the car because of an injury. So if you and we're not going to help you, but if you and your team can make it into the top 30 in points, then we will allow you to take part in our chase. That was not a small task. They've done a great job. You see, since Michigan, I mean, look at the points they've gained. He was 173 points out at Michigan, and they have climbed back to now +6. And now +6 is no guarantee.
Right.
They need to stay there over the next 4 weeks. But first they had to get in the top 30, and they've done that.
So, in full disclosure, I think Michigan 43rd. I think that Monday after that, I went on NASCAR America and proclaimed that they were done, that they could not make the chase. They couldn't do it. Make sure he's healthy. Focus on getting better for next year. And what they've done has been unbelievable.
Yeah.
They haven't been average. They've been great to get themselves in this position.
Yeah, I mean, the Pocono finish where he didn't have a good finish. Well, he was leading the race until he ran out of gas and then ended up, the last car on or lap down. And so it was unbelievable how close they have come. And then once again at Watkins Glen, if he pushes it a little bit harder last week, he's challenging Joey Logano for that win where he finishes second.
And even as good as Kyle Busch has been, it's not just been Kyle Busch. I mean, look at Joe Gibbs, and here they are once again, 2nd, 3rd, 5th, and 8th in practice. They have been on a roll. They've been fast with low downforce. They've been fast with high drag. They've been fast with the standard package. Whatever style, type of racetrack we go to, a 1 mile at New Hampshire, a 2.5 mile at the Brickyard, it hasn't seemed to affect, even to the Xfinity Series.
Right.
It's rare that you see that much momentum go top to bottom across an entire field.
Yeah, and without a doubt, I thought Kyle Busch's timing when he came back was good with Gibbs. Gibbs is starting to get on the rise, starting to figure things out. But then if you listen to Matt Kenseth, who we're seeing here, you listen to him, when Kyle came back, that also helped the team because now they had the guy that they're accustomed to communicating with. Kyle was accustomed to the team, accustomed to all the personnel. He knew how to talk to people, who to talk to about certain issues. And having Kyle back is not only were the cars better, but having him back helped make the company better as well. So, and not just the 18 car, but all the teams it gives.
Yeah, incredible statistic. Either a Joe Gibbs Racing or a Penske car has won every Xfinity Series and Cup race the last 5 races.
You know what that tells me?
That you wanted to drive for Gibbs?
Well, but that also tells me there is a list of teams that are unhappy because that's only 2 teams in a garage full that they're expect to win. When you think of SHR, you think of Hendrick, you think of these other race teams that are expecting to get wins. When those 2 teams are winning everything, there's nothing left for everyone else.
A lot of domination. Mike Massaro.
Well, it's been a successful hour, I would say, for the 88 team so far in this practice. They started the first practice off, and, well, Dale Jr. was completely unhappy with the race car. Very loose, had no rear grip. They've made some changes. They've tightened it up. The center is now much better, he says, but still, he's looking for a little bit more.
I feel like you could just set it up real simple to where I could just run wide open through the corner and give up a little bit of straightaway speed, but be way more comfortable in the corner than I am. I'm just getting beat because I'm sitting there half throttle all the way through the corner.
So obviously Dale Jr. wants to be on the throttle a little bit more, Steve, it would seem.
Yeah, I mean, basically what Dale's asking for is we talk about this balance between speed and handling, and he is of the opinion, by the sounds of that radio, that what he wants to try is to put what I would call a max downforce, a max handling setup in. Put the spoiler up in the air, extend the skirts all the way down. Forget about straight line speed. You know, Michigan is there's a lot of corner at Michigan. You know, you're in the throttle a long time at the corner, and he feels he's being beat, it sounds like, Jeff, because he hasn't been able to commit to that throttle. The problem is, if another team is able to commit to the throttle yet hasn't compromised that much drag or downforce to get there, that's where it gets in trouble. But I understand what he's saying. Hey, let's go all the way one way and we'll work our way back if it doesn't work.
Racing is a game of compromises. Then you have to understand where the most efficient place of compromise is. If you can't go around the racetrack wide open, then you have to know where to make the compromises. If it's easy to go around wide open, you take all the downforce off, you just go wide open. No big deal. But a track like this, it's not that easy. How much downforce do you need versus how much drag do you want in order to make the car raceable, drivable, and a car that you can race around other cars? That's what today is about. That's what they're trying to learn.
And just, oh, by the way, in 85 minutes when practice ends, it's going to be all about how fast you go by yourself. Sure. And remember, you still have to do qualify. And that's when we talk about that quicksand you can get into. As you hear it in Dale Jr.'s voice, let's just do this, let's do that. And it's going to be very important for Greg Ives to stand up and say, now, hold on a minute, stop. Let's do that tomorrow morning. Right now, maybe we get in qualifying straight. Maybe we move this practice forward, because if you get too stuck in the now, you won't be prepared when qualifying rolls around.
And what makes that even more complicated is that tomorrow morning's practice, guess where the racetrack is?
Oh,
it's
yeah.
Cool. It's overcast. It always is overcast in the morning here, it seems like. Yep. You don't have good track conditions. So right now, the sun's not completely out, but it's warmer. These are the track conditions that you want for Sunday. So you're going to have to compromise there. What do we want to do? Do we need to learn now because the track's good? We've already seen a couple cars go to Q trim. Tony Stewart, Austin Dillon. They decided, hey, look, we're going to go to Q trim. We want to get our cars qualified well. We're going to go ahead and switch early, have an hour and 15 minutes. They're both P1, P2 on the board. It's all a question of what do you think is the most important.
Did you mention Tony Stewart, Austin Dillon? Two impressive laps by both those drivers. About a half a second on the rest of the field. Denny Hamlin, Kyle Busch, and Kevin Harvick, the top five in this first practice as we've reached the halfway point. Lucien Boutte makes his return to the ring against Andre De Luisa. Also, Elader Alvarez and Isidro Prieto put their undefeated records on the line. That's Premier Boxing Champions tomorrow night at 9 on NBCSN. Four of the hardest names I've ever had to say.
That was very well done. Very well done. I was scared to death that you were going to ask me to help out.
There's a reason that they don't ask you and me to help out with that. Very clear.
And they're great boxers on top of all of that. Kyle Larson on track. He's got the best 5-lap average.
Hey, and he needs to. We talked about guys in the bubble. Kyle Larson is the guy. Remember, he missed Martinsville. He had a little health issue. I passed out at an appearance Saturday afternoon. They couldn't get medically cleared for Sunday. So since he sat out that Martinsville race, Chris Heroy, his crew chief, and Kyle Larson have been very aggressive with their race calls. Just here at Michigan, they decided to stay out with only a few laps left in the tank.
So close.
Those looming dark clouds you see right there. Just let it rain.
Please rain. Please rain.
They have to come to pit road only 3 laps, Jeff. 3 laps before the end of the race when the rain finally came.
Well, what a good call, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
they were in the situation. They felt like they had to get a win. I applaud the call. It ended up not working out, but what do you have to lose, man? You do it right. You could win a championship. It's worth the gamble.
This is a guy, I mean, look, last year I think we all were giving him a win. The speed this 42 car had in his rookie season, we all think it was just a matter of when. And I still believe it's a matter of when. but it does appear that year 2 has been a little bit more of a battle compared to year 1.
This sport's hard. This is not an easy sport. And
I know I retired.
Wait a minute. What?
I retired from down there in the
I was
garage.
going to say, hold on.
It's hard to win these races. I mean, everything has got to go right. It's very difficult. So running well last year doesn't guarantee you anything for this year. Running well next week doesn't guarantee you're going to run well the following week. You have to earn it every single race.
I continue to tell people the one thing that is so unique about racing is that you are racing against 42 of the best race car drivers in the world every week. It's not like you're playing against, they're the conference champions, we're playing against them next week, and then we get, a little bit of an easier week against,
you don't get an off week.
You never get an off week.
You don't get an off week off the 1-12 team, right? You got a 1-12 team, all right, we don't have to play our starters the whole game. You got to race Jimmy Johnson. You got to race Kevin Harvick. You got to race Tony Stewart, Hamlin, Kyle Busch, Kurt. But you got to race these guys every single week.
Hey, we heard earlier about Dale Earnhardt Jr. talking about, hey, can we just put a package in here that allows me to stay on the throttle? And it seems that they have accomplished some of this. He's breathing the throttle, but he's back to wide open. Well, see, he's continuing to breathe it all the way to the wall, and his speed hurts. We've been on board with multiple cars that have showed 196, 197 miles an hour. That whole lap with Dale Jr., I only saw 194 on the front stretch.
And right on cue, you started
again.
talking about it. They can't.
I'm like the Grim Reaper of practice. If I talk about you, you're quitting.
They decided we can't go any further. Steve's talking about us.
I'm just gonna go for a walk.
Tony Stewart back out on track. He has 16 laps that he's completed. The last time out there was in qualifying trim, so he was getting ready for this afternoon's qualifying. He ran the fastest lap at a 37.195. We'll see how he's doing now on this lap.
And I like this approach. Remember when we were in Indianapolis, 37.07 goes even faster. When we were in Indianapolis with this high drag package, I know the track is totally different, but it was single car qualifying with this high drag package. Tony Stewart in the first round put an unbelievable lap time up, almost a half a second. Kyle Larson and Tony Stewart were almost a half a second clear of the field. Now, he ended up not getting the pole. Carl Edwards ended up getting the pole in the second round. But this focus on qualifying for this 14 car could be just what they need. You know, we talk about trying to get some momentum, that had some decent runs, trying to get back on track where they think they need to be. Jeff, at this point, don't you think just a good qualifying run, anything that puts light at the end of the tunnel has to help this team?
Yeah, and that's what they've been getting the last 3 weeks. They've qualified well. They've had good things go for them. They got to keep building on it. They got to keep having positives to add on top of the other positives. Mike?
Yeah, Jeff, earlier in the show, we talked about the rule change that NASCAR made to help the drivers be a little bit more comfortable in the car in terms of adding a little additional airflow, trying to make it a little bit cooler. They've allowed teams, or actually mandated teams, add 2 NACA ducts on the right side of the car. Well, as a caveat to that rule, these teams are allowed to seal those up when they go to qualifying trim. And that's exactly what's happening right down here in the garage right now. You can see on the 2 team a piece of Lexan put over the ducting so that it's a little bit more aerodynamic. And obviously, you want to reduce drag for qualifying. And Steve, this gives crew chiefs a little bit of comfort. I mean, they didn't want to give that up for race trim, but you know, I would imagine be happy to get it back at least in Q trim.
Well, the problem I would have with having it open in Q trim, Mike, is there's a tremendous amount of air moving through there. A lot. At 180 miles an hour, those 2 NACA ducts are pumping a ton of air into the cockpit.
And you can really feel that air. Watch Dale Jr. Look at his sleeve moving. You can really feel that air inside that car. It's a huge difference. The driver feels that air moving around.
Yeah, and what does all that air do? You see right here, Greg Biffle, his seatbelt flapping around in the breeze. Well, qualifying, I would be concerned that maybe another crew chief has found a way to block that air, maybe kink the hose. Maybe the driver's going to reach down and plug the hose. So let's just make it fair for everybody. Quit playing games. Tape it up for qualifying. You're not going to want to. It's not a big enough advantage that you'd block it all day long in the race. But for 1 lap qualifying, the competitor in me said there's probably a way to get around that. So I think it's a great idea to just let everybody block them.
And don't forget, we saw Carl Edwards early in practice taking his hand off the steering wheel. I don't want to guarantee it because I'm not going to go that far, but I'm pretty sure that Carl Edwards had his hand over the hoses blocking that air off. There's no rule against that.
That's right.
You take your hand off the wheel and block those. All that does is reduces the drag and makes the car go down the straightaway better. So you saw him, he put his hands back on the wheel in the corner, probably because he wanted his hands back on the wheel in the corner. But also, it's more important to get that blocked off to reduce the drag down the straight.
Listen, the things we'll ask a driver to do, I mean, listen, they're professionals, right? Well, sure, go around here one-handed. I want you to use your hand to block this, drive around left-handed. It's only about 198 miles an hour. It should be easy.
By the way, that little opening in the window called a NACA duct, that was invented back in 1945 by the National Committee for Aeronautics. which, oh, by the way, was NASA's precursor.
So now you're going to get smart.
NASA helping out in NASCAR.
6 weeks
Didn't even know about it.
A genius.
Welcome back to NASCAR Sprint Cup Series practice from Michigan International Speedway, presented by DraftKings. The big story coming into this race and this weekend has to be the rule changes. We saw similar to this at Indianapolis. Now they're going to try it at a 2-mile track that has a lot more sweeping turns.
Yeah, so when we talk rule changes, what have we done, Rick? Well, we're trying to increase the drag on these cars. How do we do that? We extend the rear fascia closer to the ground. That's what's creating the majority of the drag. But it also kills downforce. So how do we offset that? We increase the spoiler height from 6 to 9 inches. We put a 1-inch wicker bill, which is like a return flange on the top of the spoiler. And we also have widened the radiator pan to try to add some more downforce. So that sounds cool and it's great, but why, Jeff, is it important that we change these rules?
Well, if you look at the 2015 downforce package, what's happened is the air goes over the car, the leading car, and then it goes over the trailing car. In the new package, it goes way over the car, enabling the trailing car to gain down the straightaway, get a draft, and be able to have an advantage somewhere on the racetrack as opposed to only having a disadvantage because of losing the downforce in the corners.
And we saw this at Indy. We see drafting right there, the 22 pushing the 48. Right here, we're going to see cars pulling out of line, getting that run to 17 with a big block by the 1. But the big difference between Indianapolis and Michigan is right here. Martin Truex completes the pass of Dale Jr. Dale Jr. needs to get back in line. Single file corners at Indianapolis, very one-groove corners. We come down here to Michigan, Jeff, wide corners. Maybe these guys will have more options when they get to the end of the straight.
That's right, and we talked about Indy. It wasn't as the huge success that everybody was hoping for, but the race was no worse. So it's worth coming here, going to a racetrack where you have multiple grooves so a driver doesn't have to follow someone through the corner, lose the downforce in the corner. If you can go somewhere else, go above and below them, not lose that downforce, but then gain the drafting down the straightaway and hopefully get an advantage.
Hey guys, in addition to the reputation this racetrack has for having multiple grooves, it has another reputation. I know you're aware of it. It's somewhat of a fuel mileage track at times. And in light of what we've seen the last couple of weeks, with these races coming down to fuel mileage, I know that teams really are concentrating on trying to figure out exactly how far they can go on a fuel run. But my curiosity is, with this new rule package and with the possibility of drafting and with the additional drag, how much does that muddy the water in terms of what you're trying to figure out here in terms of fuel mileage for the race?
Oh, it's cloudy, Mike. It's real cloudy because, listen, what is drag? Drag is the amount of force it takes to push that car through the wind. All these auto manufacturers, when they talk about building these cars, they put them in the wind tunnel to try to make them quiet so they sound good inside. But they also are working on fuel consumption. There's a reason that all these guys, all these auto manufacturers, Chevy, Toyota, Ford, are trying to get 35, 40 miles per the gallon down the interstate. How do you do that? By reducing drag. Well, then you can take a stock car to Michigan. By itself, pretty easy to figure, burning a bunch of fuel. But now all day long, you're going to be in and out of traffic. Your drag number is going to go up and down. I think the hardest part about fuel mileage is the consistency. And it's tough enough on a normal weekend. When you get a new package, big packs, and guys in and out of the throttle, there's going to be a lot of guessing games on Sunday.
And so here's the other problem with Sunday. Let's say you run 8th, 9th, 10th all day long. You're behind cars. You're getting a lot of drafting help. And then all of a sudden your pit crew does 2 tires at the end of the race, and now you're leading. You have no draft help.
Right.
How much worse is the fuel mileage going to be? So that's the question the drivers, the crew chiefs are going to have to ask themselves. What is my fuel mileage going to be at the end of the race when I'm leading the race versus what was it when I was in the middle of the pack, in the middle of the race?
And Mike, obviously a great point that you brought up, this being possibly a fuel mileage race. Back in 2009, that's the way it ended. Jimmy Johnson out in front as he's about to take the white flag. He doesn't get there. He runs out of fuel. So Greg Biffle, the race leader, on the last lap. Does Greg have enough fuel? No, he does not. Casey Kane does. He's able to hold on and end up winning. Mark Martin in the 5 back in 2009.
Don't take the win away from Mark. He won a fuel mileage race. He doesn't win fuel mileage races.
I was thinking today. That's right.
If you were giving races away, I would have took a win somewhere in there. Hey, and listen, why is this place a fuel mileage? First of all, anytime you're burning fuel, it could be a fuel mileage race. I don't care if you go to Bristol. There could be fuel mileage in the strategy, even if it's not obvious. But why does it become more obvious at Michigan? Because of the size of the track. It's a 2-mile racetrack. So the windows become very small. You know, run an extra lap here, it's 2 miles. That's a lot of fuel you burn. Also, it's become worse since they've put this new surface down because these tires last forever. So now, even if a caution comes out, old surface, you're like, oh, we're all going to pit, not a few miles race. Well, this year we saw it last week at Watkins Glen. The caution comes out, they choose not to pit, forcing themselves into a fuel mileage race. We'll see the same thing on Sunday. Just because of the caution doesn't mean it's not a fuel mileage race, because guys will stretch that fuel to try to stay on the racetrack.
And as we're looking at Kyle Larson, there's a driver who will try to stretch it to get a win potentially here, because he's going to need one to get in the chase.
We saw earlier, we saw all these cars trying to learn. Look at Casey Mears up the racetrack. Car gets really loose, does a nice job trying a nice job saving it. That's just a good example. The team's experimenting, trying something. Well, let's listen. You see the car start to get up the racetrack, and as he got far enough up there, it continued to get loose, and he had to get all the way out of the throttle. Now, I think on Sunday you'll be able to drive the car up there. I think we'll continue to see the groove to widen out, and he won't be in a bad place. But right there, he's just a little bit out of the groove.
Yeah, when you talk about the groove, I mean, you see right here, he's in the gray. And you know, you can distinctly see the difference between the black and the gray. But remember, this is the first group of cars on the racetrack. The trucks are here this weekend with the Sprint Cup cars. They haven't practiced yet. When they'll get out here, even more rubber will be put down on the racetrack. And this black line, you already see the 13 chasing the top, trying to get to the edge of that black line. Without a doubt, Sunday afternoon, listen, the groove's great, but if I'm trying to pass you, I have to not follow you into the corner, which forces the groove to get widened out.
A wide racetrack that continues to get even wider as we get a little more time on this asphalt. It was repaved back in 2012. So the different grooves getting a little bit wider here at Michigan International Speedway. Tony Stewart, Austin Dillon, the fastest two here. The Xfinity Series practice from Mid-Ohio will be right after us at 1:30. Then at 3 o'clock, Xfinity Series final practice. Mid-Ohio on NBC Live Extra. Sprint Cup Series qualifying at 5 o'clock. Again, it will be 2 rounds. Who will be the top 12 in that first round to advance and potentially win the pole here? The day gets wrapped up with NASCAR America at 7 o'clock. Mike Massaro.
And the 19 team has just switched over to qualifying trim. Carl Edwards buckling in right now. And let's talk about race trim, shall we? What did you notice about this new package here?
It's different. It seems to be a little faster through the corners. We do draft a little bit down the straightaways, and but man, this is cool. Bob Stancione from Aris told us all he cares about is being fast. His car is fast. All the JGR Toyotas are fast. And now we're going to go over to qualifying trim, see if we can do it there. But I think we've got a pretty good car here.
Have you gotten a sense yet how much different this race might be compared to the one in June?
This race is going to be different. The cars throw a huge wake off, and you really struggle behind other guys to figure out how to get your car to work. So fortunately, we have a wide racetrack. This racetrack's got 4 or 5 grooves in the corner, so you'll be able to search around. But it is going to be very difficult in practice to make your car do what you want it to do.
I'll let you go back to work.
Thanks, man.
Carl Edwards getting ready to go take a couple laps in Q trim, guys.
Getting this practice session going until 1:30. And Justin Allgaier on track, 33rd quick. They're still trying to find some speed. Looked very good, though, a week ago at Watkins Glen. Very impressive.
He did. They made the third round of qualifying at Watkins Glen. Excuse me, the final round.
Yep.
The final round of qualifying at Watkins Glen. But it definitely wasn't the race he had hoped for. Him and Jimmy Johnson had a little contact getting into turn 1. You see right here, Jimmy Johnson thinks he has a position underneath the 51. The 51 turns down. I know on the radio he said he was very unhappy with the 48, but I read on Twitter later in the week that they had at least spoken, and I'll say cleared the air. I don't think anyone is any more happy about the situation. He still gets spun out and hurt his day, but I think he understood the situation more. But, you know, this is a team that has its bright spots. Last week qualifying at Watkins Glen was one of them. Harry Scott owns the 51 and the 46. He's a 2-car owner. And, you know, we talk about the smaller teams that are trying to find their way through the garage area. Well, this is one of them.
Is that what has happened in sports today? We air our grievances on social media?
Yeah, so everybody can hear. That way you can have a
about
private conversation with the hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, it's nothing like face-to-face behind a keyboard and 140 characters each.
Exactly.
Listen, I think drivers should reach out to each other and talk. I really do. I think if you make a mistake, or even if you feel like somebody made a mistake and it harmed you, I believe in communicating. Whether they're doing it on social media
Right.
is effective or not, I don't know. But I think drivers should communicate.
Again, earlier we saw Dale Earnhardt Jr. trying to figure out how to be in the throttle more in the turn. Steve, are you seeing it more on this run?
Well, it still had some out of throttle time into turn 3. Here we are in turn 1 and 2. You see him out of the throttle. The trick is from here up, he has to be committed to the throttle. Still just that little question mark on the throttle right there that we're not hearing with all the cars.
That's right, and there's enough question that they haven't gone to Q-Trim yet. There's 51 minutes left. They feel like they still have to work on their car. They've not been able to go to Q-Trim like we've been talking about to try to get that best Q lap. So they're still working on race trim here.
And sometimes you have to just throw the towel in. You have more practice tomorrow, Now, I might eat my words. They might go out and have a great qualifying run. But the concern is with 51 minutes left, it normally takes 20 to 25 minutes to swap one of these cars over. You have to pump the fuel out. You have to move the lead. You have to add tape to the grill. You have to rescale the car. There's a lot of things. When we say swap to Q-Trim, that's
right.
a great term. But there's a lot of things that go with that, a lot of changes that go with that. If that burns practice time, so with only 51 minutes left, you see they're already lining up on pit road to make qualifying runs, Jeff. So now you run yourself short. Maybe you don't get a clean lap. Maybe you only get one lap. And qualifying poorly, while it doesn't end your weekend, you can absolutely recover. It just makes it definitely more of an uphill battle on Sunday.
And we worked, most all the cars that worked on race trim. We now have about 8 cars lined up on pit road, get in line to go make Q-Trim runs. So all the teams now are starting to switch over. Again, this is more time they normally get. Normally they don't have this long of a practice on Friday, but they do today because of this package. You see Jamie really working those tires. This is the second time out in Q-Trim. We're probably going to see him go faster. If they made no change to the car at all, he would probably go faster the second time out with this tire. So you can see him scuffing those tires, really working the car down the back straightaway to get as much heat in those tires as he could possibly get.
And so we'll be able to expect that in qualifying later, that the second round we could see faster speeds than we see in the first round.
And just to remind everybody, we're going to go to single car, 2-round qualifying. With this new package that NASCAR brought here, this high drag package, we're trying to eliminate any sort of games to be played. When you look at there's a potential advantage of drafting another car like we saw at Daytona and Talladega, the 3 rounds of qualifying, group qualifying was unsuccessful, right? It led for drama, people waiting on pit road. We saw accidents on the racetrack. It was just not the best fit for that type of format. Coming to Indianapolis and here to Michigan with this high drag package, NASCAR has decided, you know what? We're not going to have any potential issues with this. We're just going to go back to one car at a time. And it worked very well at Indy. I expect it to be successful again this afternoon.
And Jamie moved up one spot. He was 5th, and now he's 4th in Q-Trim.
Jamie McMurray, top 5. Tony Stewart still fastest. His Q run 37.077. Next Sunday, the Verizon IndyCar Series is on NBCSN. Championship still up for grabs. Graham Rahal cut Juan Pablo Montoya's point lead to 9 following the victory in the last race. Verizon IndyCar Series on NBCSN from Pocono Raceway. That's Sunday, August 23rd. Coverage presented by MAV TV.
And man, let me tell you, they fly around Pocono. Have you
Yes,
seen those
they do.
Indy cars go through the tunnel? It's not even a corner to those.
Yes,
I mean,
it's like Indy.
Yeah, I mean, it is. When you watch those IRL cars, those Indy cars go around Pocono, it is a fascinating thing to watch.
Joey Logano, most recent winner, swept the weekend at Watkins Glen. Won the Xfinity race on Saturday.
He's taking a
back
checker.
up.
Sorry.
Oh, he's fine.
He's taking a checkered flag on his mock Q run, moved him up to 6th.
Listen, guys, Tony Stewart is still okay. So when someone switches over to qualifying trim early, you're like, oh, that was a good lap, but I don't know, until everybody swaps over. Man, he's run 3 laps, 37.10, 37.0, and now at 36.99. Those are 3 laps that would be at the top 1 or 2 positions. He's consistently been fast.
And it's a half a second faster than what Logano just ran. A half a second.
Right.
So he has been fast the whole time.
Jeb Burton behind the wheel of the 26. Remember back to Pocono when he came out of turn 3 and got into the pit road wall. that could never happen. There's no way that anybody could do that. Remember, with Mark Martin in the 55, he got into the inside wall. As we mentioned, Pocono weeks ago, Jeff Burton in practice gets onto pit road, and then Casey Kane does the almost exact same thing a little bit further down pit road. So Michigan has made some changes here to the track. As we see, they worked on that wall and were able to fix it at Pocono. Michigan put some extensions to pit road to try to prevent that from happening. And they are continuing to make improvements to this racetrack. And as soon as this race is over, you see that's the extension onto pit road, the outside wall, trying to prevent the cars from being able to come onto pit road. But they will, once this race is over, they're also going to add additional safer barrier around this track. So a lot of things being done to continue to keep people safe on pit road.
And listen, this is something they have to discuss because, you know, why it would seem, well, man, just extend that wall all the way down. Make sure there's no way these cars can get on pit road, but you got to understand, well, Mark Martin went right through that area when he came to pit road, so now there's an exposed wall for these drivers to hit. So for every action, there's a reaction. For everything that happens, there's a reason it's that way. People way smarter than me about racetrack designs have looked into it. NASCAR and this racetrack have decided that they can extend that wall. It won't be worse for the competitors on the track, but it'll make it safer on pit road. But it's not an easy answer, is it, Jeff?
No, I mean, it's not.
There could be an argument to all of it.
That's right. It's a very difficult decision. How do you decide to extend that? To me, I want to extend it the other way. I want to extend pit road to turn 1 and make the pit road wall longer in turn 1. I just think it's a safer way to have the wall. You don't have that wall exposed to the drivers quite as much. But that's easy for me to say. I don't own the racetracks and don't understand all the infrastructure to do that. It's very difficult, I'm sure, but I want to see pit roads move toward turn 1 rather than extending the pit wall toward turn.
And maybe that's the long-term effect. You know, Michigan had a short window of time to make this change.
You can see pit road. You can see how you have to have all this room behind the pit road wall. You see where the cars would pit. Behind the pit road wall, you have to have all that room in case of a fire, in case of things like that. So there has to be a way. The track's got to be able to make that work all the way down toward turn 1. I'm not saying it's easy, but long-term, that would be the way I'd like to see it fixed.
Staying on the forefront of safety. Michigan again making some changes here to the racetrack. Tony Stewart is still the fastest on track. Welcome back to Michigan International Speedway as Sprint Cup Series practice continues, presented by DraftKings. We're talking about safety and the different changes that have been made here at Michigan to try to eliminate the possibility of cars coming onto pit road at speed out of control.
So here's what's so difficult. You know, I just made the comment that what I'd like to see is pit road extended toward turn 1. But if you did that, then you have to extend the wall all the way toward turn 1. But now think about how close the cars would be to the end of the wall getting into turn 1. So a lot of these questions, although you think they're easy, well, just do this. Steve had a great point. Everything you do has a reaction. Something can happen that you didn't think about. So we wouldn't want a wall extended all the way over here where cars could hit it. So what is the right way to fix it? You know, and that's always a difficult question. You have to protect. We know this. We have to protect the guys on pit road. They don't have roll cages around them. They don't have fire extinguishers to protect them. They don't have fire suits on. Well, they do have fire suits on. They don't. You know, it's not the same as a driver. Okay. So we have to protect the crew members any way we can. At the same time, we have to do it in a fashion that's as safe as possible for the drivers too. Very difficult decisions that have to be made.
I think what we all forget, and I'm the first one to do it, is we sit here all day long and we watch these cars go around here. And I think, well, track record's 206 miles an hour. They're only running 194 miles an hour.
Only.
Can we stop for a minute and really talk 194 miles an hour? That speed is ridiculous. And when you get 3,500 pounds, you showed it earlier, Jeff, middle of the corner, 186 miles an hour. They're not slowing down anywhere. So at any point on this 2-mile racetrack, if you have a problem with a 3,500-pound piece of steel at over 180 miles an hour, it takes a long time for that energy to dissipate. That car's going to slide a long ways. It can go in any direction. You can gamble all you want about which way you think it's going to go, and as soon as another car contacts it, it goes in the exact opposite direction. So the one thing about crashes are they're very hard to predict, and I think you say it all the time, Jeff, you can never achieve safety. It's a continuum evolution. You always have to strive for it, but you can never find the finish.
And Pocono is a great example. How many times have you been to Pocono, Steve? Have you ever seen a car
That's
go
right.
down pit road? We saw it twice in 2 days.
Right.
You just never know where these cars can end up. And that's why I say, without a doubt, we got to make it as safe for the drivers as we can. But the crew members do not have roll cages around.
Right.
We got to do anything we can to make it safe for them as well.
Mike Massaro.
Well, like any other sport, Rick, chemistry, it's a big part of the equation. You got to be able to get along to go along, so to speak. And, well, you could hear that there was some developing chemistry between Carl Edwards and his crew chief, Darian Grubb, just moments ago.
Yeah, Jason, I won't do that again. I didn't listen to you. Yeah, 10-4. I wasn't trying to be upset. I just wanted you to know that I thought we were going to get some help there, so it was fine. No, I'm not. I screwed it up. I need to listen to you. You know me. I get impatient. Oh, come on. You're the most patient person I ever met. And that was a joke. Yeah, I know.
Patience. It's not a word that's real compatible with this sport, I wouldn't imagine. It's all about speed and getting there as fast as you can. Speaking of which, I'm going to get to Kelly right now.
Guy who knows what it's like to be fast here at Michigan. 4 wins for Greg Biffle, and you'd certainly like to get another one and get back into the chase. Let's first talk about these drag packages. How do they compare running here versus Indy?
Yeah, I'm surprised how fast the center corner speed is. We're really fast in the middle of the corner, and not a lot of throttle off time. So we'll have to wait and see. We're just switching to Q trim. It's going to be interesting to see how they drive around other cars. That's going to be the most important thing for this package.
What is it that your biggest focus is in race trim at this point?
Well, we just finished up. We're pretty happy with the balance of the car, the way it's driving. But I think the biggest thing is going to be in traffic. How are they going to drive around other cars? How are they going to pass? Because a little on edge by yourself, I think we get around a bunch of cars that might be a little different.
Greg, when I talked to you earlier this week, you told me that you thought this was one of the tracks you guys would have the best opportunity to get a win, get into the chase. Is there a sense of intensified pressure around the team this weekend?
I think so. We started off the truck really far off again, and we've really honed in on it quickly, though, this weekend. So curious to see how this qualifying trim package works out, stacks us up. But we're fairly happy in race trim, although we're only 20th quick in race trim or so. We think we can build on that tomorrow.
All right, I'll let you get back to it. Thank you, Greg.
23rd quick in this practice session, but if we look back to June of 2013, that was the last time Roush Fenway got a win with one of the drivers that's currently in the Roush Fenway stables at this point, which, Jeff, we lost Carl Edwards to Joe Gibbs Racing, so he was the most recent win for Roush Fenway, but of the guys that are still on the team, it was Greg Biffle's win back in 2013 here at this track.
Yeah, we talked about this at the beginning of the year that running race teams is complicated. You have the competition side of it. You also have the business side of it. But losing Matt Kenseth and then the next year losing Carl Edwards, definitely 2 veteran drivers in the sport, guys that can really lead a company, definitely hurt Roush Fenway. But coming back to Michigan, it has to be at least some light for them, Jeff. This is a place they might have some more confidence coming to. When you look at a younger driver like Trevor Bayne, perhaps they have a little bit more notes at a place like that. But now, as soon as we come with a new aero package that might not relate to any of the trips they've had here.
Yeah, and one thing about Roush Fenway, and I think we forget this sometimes, we talked about it a little bit last week during the Xfinity race. Think about what they've done. They've invested in young drivers. They did lose Carl Edwards. They did lose Matt Kenseth. But go back and look at the Xfinity Series. You can see what they're trying to do with Chris Buescher, with
Darrell Wallace
Jr.,
Yep.
Trevor Bayne, Ricky Stenhouse. These are all young guys. If Roush Fenway can get their cars back performing the way that Jack Roush has said they're going to get them performing, think about what they've done. They've built a young group of drivers in their pipeline that they can move up to Cup, sell sponsorship with, and move the company into the next phase of its existence. So although the performance isn't there yet, they have a plan, and if they can't get the cars running, then they have a plan that they can be successful with for a long time in the future.
And of course, Ryan Reed started off the 2015 season winning for Roush Fenway at Daytona. They have since not been able to get back to victory lane. Tony Stewart still the fastest in this first practice. Live on NBCSN Sunday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern at Sprint Cup Series racing from Michigan. And tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern, Xfinity Series. Nationwide Children's Hospital 200 at Mid-Ohio. Guys getting ready for mock qualifying runs. Again, the qualifying will be different. It's not going to be group qualifying where everybody goes out. They have a set amount of time to, put as many laps in as they can. It will be, you'll see single cars out there. They could put 2 cars on the track at one time.
Yeah.
But they won't be able to assist one another.
Yeah, the time has come. We talk about the package. We talk about the draft. We talk about the drag. Now it's go make a lap as fast as you can make a lap. It's all on you, your own car, your own race team. Casey Kane on the screen right here making his qualifying run. He's had a rough 2 weeks in a row. Out early at Pocono, another bad run at Watkins Glen, involved in an incident there. Well below the line. 51 points is going to be very hard to make up in only 4 weeks, Jeff. Guys like Casey Kane in this 5 car have to be looking for wins and wins only at this point.
And we've seen Kane win his way in to get into the chase before. And he sat on the pole here in the spring, so this is a racetrack that they feel like they can get that win. It's important for him to qualify well. He's currently P5 on his second run, just moved up to P3, so that's a good sign for those guys.
The reason they are 51 points out of 16th is because they've had struggles. Back at Daytona, right in front of Casey Kane, the 20 of Matt Kenseth gets turned around, he gets collected. Then at Kentucky, out of the groove, up to the wall. Loudon, again, issues. Got in the back of Menard. At Indianapolis, it was getting into the back of his teammate. And then Pocono, coming out of turn 3 and into the pit wall. Even last week, things bottled up in front of him. No time to check up. And his day ended quickly.
That's some great camera work and great illustrations, but this is not the graphic you want to see if you're Keith Rodden and Casey Kane in this 5 car. Ahead 55 points in Daytona. Fast forward 6 weeks, 51 points out. Now that point swing is not only because he's had some rough times, but when Kyle Busch moved up in, that line continued to move. Casey Kane's one of those guys hoping to get a win to try to bump that line up.
And what sticks in my mind is in the last 2 weeks when we've interviewed him after those wrecks, he has just been stunned.
Absolutely.
He looks like a basketball team that were up by 20 and now they're down by 20, right? He just looks shocked. So, but you heard him last week. He immediately identified and said, look, we just got to go win, right? Like, no points or anything. They know their mission. They know what they've got to do. It's another thing to get it done because we talked about earlier, it's hard to win in this series, but they know they've got to win. They've got 4 races to do it. We've seen Kane, I think each of the last 3 years, he's won races to get in the chase, so they know how to do it. They just got to go execute.
Carl Edwards on a mock qualifying run. He is now up to speed. He's second fastest, right behind Tony Stewart.
Just listen. Never even thought about cracking the throttle down in 1 and 2, Jeff. We'll see if he can be just as 193 miles an hour off the corner. We've only seen like 196 in race trim. Here, Carl Edwards is going to eclipse over 200 miles an hour entering turn 3 and doesn't get out of the throttle.
Let's see how far it falls. It was 201 miles an hour at a low speed. You can hear him try to pedal the throttle or drag the brake 1. He had to get down. He lost 10 miles an hour. That's probably more miles per hour loss than he needs to be as good. And as I say that, he goes to P1. So that shows you what I know.
Well, obviously a great run for Carl Edwards, but I would say he's probably the first one we've seen that's been wide open all the way through the turn.
You know what I think is so cool, and I probably didn't appreciate it as much when I was doing it as I am now watching it. These drivers, they have to adjust on the fly. I mean, it's a completely different package. They have to go out, try to run wide open. You don't come to Michigan and run wide open. You know what I mean? You just don't do that. So immediately they identify what their car can and can't do. They communicate that with the team. They make the adjustment as a driver and go out and run wide open and get P1 on the board. Kelly?
Hey, getting back to that Casey Kane conversation, I saw his crew chief, Keith Rodden, at the start of this practice, and he said, hey, remember when I told you after Pocono it couldn't get any worse? And then he said, well, actually, Watkins Glen, we finished 42nd, so we did improve by a spot. But even as they get closer to the chase and things have not been going well, Keith Rodden says there's really nothing more for them to do. They've been going as aggressively as they can in all aspects of this car and in terms of strategy for the last several weeks. But he also said, hey, I don't think there is a track left on the schedule where Casey Kane can't win. So he feels confident they'll get it done. Right next to Casey Kane is the 43, and guess who is getting into that car? Eric Almirola. He showed up. He's been ill, as we've been reporting. Matt Crafton has been working on the car's setup during this practice all day. Eric has just shown up, so he's going to try to get a couple of those laps in so he can then qualify the car later on today.
Thanks, Kelly. It's good to see Eric getting in the car. But look, I want to take a minute and look at this garage area. When it rains, it pours. When you're not having a great year, you end up farther down in the points. The cars are parked in the garage area by points. The 5 of Casey Kane, the 43 of Eric Almirola in the mid-teens in points. Look at how cramped this garage area is. Those aren't teammates. Those are two cars, two opposite manufacturers trying to get their cars tuned in for the race weekend while stepping over one another, working over one another. So you take a hot, frustrating day and then jam two cars in the garage stall, where if you go to the other side of the garage, you have these luxurious condo suites of the 48 car where you have all they put. Look how much room they have.
Yeah,
it's way easy to stay calm when you have one car per stall. And listen, this isn't because NASCAR likes the 48 better than the 5. Everyone has this opportunity. If you want prime parking in the garage area, you got to stay up in the top 3, 4, 5 at points. It depends on where you go. And I can tell you, it's really important when you show up. Man, I really hope we got one of those stalls. Yeah. It changes the whole weekend.
So we talked about the teams, how getting the back of the car to travel. We see the 31. The fabricator's actually cutting the side skirt. What they're doing is they're going to change the springs in the back. Look how much side skirt he's cut off. They're doing that because they're changing the springs in the back of the car to get it to travel and seal those side skirts off. Sometimes you do so much damage to your side skirt, you just got to replace it. You just got to put a new one on. But that's all part of the plan. They know how much more the car is going to travel. When they change the rear springs, they go ahead and cut those side skirts off, so the side skirts just touching the racetrack, but not really hitting the racetrack hard.
Not taking away any of the speed. They're doing that with the high drag package, the spoiler and wicker fill on the back of the car. Sports are giving NASCAR fans a chance to win big during the chase for the Sprint Cup with 2 ways actually to play. You can do the Quicken Loan $16 million Perfect Grid Challenge, which that ultimate prize for perfect bracket, $16 million, or the weekly Playoff Grid Challenge. Includes a chance to win weekly prizes. Find out more at NBCSports.com/Grid Challenge. I'll put you guys on the spot. Can you guys?
Hey, listen, I heard I was ineligible.
Surprising.
I'm checking the fine print. $16 million bucks? I'm filling out a grid. I'm gonna fill out a couple grids.
We'll have a little contest between the whole team. We'll see who.
Maybe that's what we can do. An internal.
Yeah,
we can do a booth grid challenge.
Well, let's not exclude our pit talent as well. We would definitely want to keep them involved.
All right, Mike Kelly.
We'll post the results.
We're gonna throw that. Oh, I think that's a great idea.
We'll post the because I don't want to hear
false
claim over here.
Why are you
guys
pointing
know
at Steve?
I had a perfect bracket last year.
Oh,
it was
of course you did.
flawless. Yep, I just forgot to submit it.
Was it written in pencil?
It was. I left it on my desk. I didn't bring it to school with me. It was perfect though.
I'm sure it was. Less than perfect last week for the Bubble guys.
So everybody's nervous going into Watkins Glen because they know it's a race. You can have trouble. So Eric Almirola, Menard getting together. Jeff Gordon had brake problems. Greg Biffle going through the grass.
Yeah, and then to top it all off, we're going to get stacked up in the restart for a 2-for-1. We're going to get the 1 of Jamie McMurray and the 5 of Casey Kane in the same incident. Both cars knocked the front end off their cars, both with heavy damage. It's not the 2-for-1 you're looking for.
No. The McCrash that McMurray was involved in, but those are the drivers that have been involved in the recent struggles.
Listen, you can't make this stuff up. The pressure of making the playoffs is real. These teams we list, Jamie McMurray, Paul Menard, Ryan Newman, Eric Almirola, Casey Kane, these are teams that when they start in February, they have the playoffs circled. They expect to be challenging for the playoffs, if not in the playoffs. So the fact that you get around, late May, June, then into July, and you're not in, that pressure starts to mount, and I really believe that pressure is what we're seeing with some of these recent struggles.
Cars coming out, getting ready to go onto the track for mock qualifying runs. So you see them waiting on pit road until they can find an opening on the track. Casey Mears on track.
And we're getting to the point where it's got to work because you're running out of time to fix it.
Right.
So as these teams start to go out, and the cars don't do what they want them to do, the driver's not happy, the driver can't drive the way he wants, hey, listen, you only have about 20 minutes to fix it. So the panic starts to set in. The teams that are doing well, they make small adjustments. The teams that are struggling, down in 15th, 18th, 20th, they're making huge changes. But it's getting to the point where you have to be able to do a good lap, make the driver comfortable. As you see, Casey Mears, we saw he just moved up to 19th. The time's running out.
Yeah, we see.
Casey Mears has a thermostat in his
thermostat.
car.
I call it a thermometer. I don't think it's a thermostat because I don't think he can adjust the temperature.
He doesn't get to adjust.
He needs to turn it down.
Yeah, I mean 120. If I was riding with him, I'd tell him to turn the AC on. I mean, if that's the thermostat.
Right here.
Yeah,
thermometer.
We're gonna look at that all week.
Hey, Casey, turn it down. Turn it down.
122 might be too warm.
Look, it's 122 degrees on a relatively cool, overcast day. So we get to Sunday afternoon, the sun breaks through. It's going to get hot inside these race cars.
I really can't get anything past you guys, can I? It's not possible. Martin Truex Jr., mock qualifying run for the road team. Carl Edwards has posted the fastest time. Over 195 miles an hour his average speed. 36.892 seconds for a lap. Prior to this run, Martin Truex Jr. 21st quickest at 37.737. Almost a whole second slower than what Carl Edwards, but he picks up on that lap. He goes 13th quickest.
And that clock continues to run at the top of your screen. Under 16 minutes left. So these teams, 2.5 hour practice. Man, what are we going to do for 2.5 hours? It goes quickly. Now you're looking at, man, only 15 minutes left. We're going to try to get a run, maybe 2 runs in. The whole garage area, people are starting to run around. The energy is starting to pick up because, it's one thing if you're in the top 5 or 8, but if you get towards the bottom of this field, you're trying to find speed. Time's running out to do that.
Joey Logano for a big weekend last weekend at Watkins Glen. Top 10.
Joey was 10th fastest with that run.
Dale Earnhardt Jr. out on the track. He was 12th quickest before this mock qualifying run. We'll see how he does.
Yeah, as was documented earlier in practice, he didn't think he could stay in the throttle as much as he'd like to in race trim. Here in qualifying trim, he jumps up to P6, up 37.19. That's a pretty decent run for the 88.
7:19, that's P6, 15 minutes left, Craig.
Carl Edwards, Tony Stewart, Casey Kane, Kyle Busch, Austin Dillon. They're the 5 fastest at Michigan. And welcome back to Michigan International Speedway. A lot of the teams paying respect to the 2015 Hall of Fame nominee, Buddy Baker, lost his life, his battle with cancer on Monday earlier this week. Buddy Baker actually won here at Michigan back in 1979. A really true icon of this sport.
Yeah, no question. And, we've seen these drivers going around here, all but wide open. That's Buddy Baker, man. I mean, he would have excelled in this kind of situation. He was a big track guy, loved the speed, did really good on the super speedways, and this type of qualifying would have fit Buddy Baker's style.
Yeah, I was never able to compete against Buddy Baker. He was out of the race car before I was in the garage area competing, but even outside the race car, he was always that guy walking around. Even when I was a tire guy or mechanic on the team, it didn't matter what position you held. Buddy would walk up in the garage, put that big 10-pound hand he had kind of on your shoulder, and just shoot the breeze.
Yeah.
See how you were doing. Meant a lot to a lot of people in the garage area that someone like that with such a great career, such a well-known person would take time to just have a conversation, and meant a lot to a lot of people, and he'll really be missed.
The gentle giant, they would call him. He was fierce on the racetrack, but as you mentioned, in the garage, just a teddy bear. He would be your best friend. And we take a look, the Gray Ghosts, old 28s, back in 1979. Buddy Baker with the win.
He was such a nice guy.
Yeah.
When my brother and I came into the sport, we came in rookies of the same year, and we started meeting people like Buddy and the Allisons, and all those guys were so nice to you. Buddy was one of those guys that would just walk up to you and, like Steve said, just talk to you. You know what I mean? And you're sitting there thinking, I watched my brother Brian, Buddy Baker was his favorite driver, and I was a Kel Yarborough guy, so we used to argue about who was better. But Buddy Baker was talking to me, you know, and I just couldn't imagine. And he took so much time and would just sit down and talk to you. It was so cool that he would do that.
Ryan Newman was actually Buddy Baker's pupil.
Yeah.
As far as mentoring, tutoring. You see Tony Stewart back out on track. He was fastest for most of the practice until Carl Edwards was able to go out and post a ridiculously fast time.
But you know, Tony's been really consistent. I mean, you know, every time he goes out, he just ran a 37.092. His fast lap was a 36.997. So he's you know, 4 or 5 runs Tony's made has all been with about a 1/10 of a second of each other. So that's, you always like to see that going into qualifying because you feel like you know what you have. They're making subtle changes. They know they got to gain a little bit, but they don't have great big humps of time they got to go find.
Under 10 minutes remaining in this first practice before qualifying will take place later this afternoon at 5 o'clock. Kyle Busch on track. He's top 5. His fastest lap run the last time he was on track, 29th lap. One of the things that Kyle Busch has to do is make sure he maintains that top 30 in points position. This might not be the track to do that. That was 2 years ago. The August race, Kyle gets loose in front of the 15 of Clint Boyer, then out of the line. Broken hub last year, into the wall. Last 4 finishes here have all been outside the top 30. Average of 38.
And that's exactly what he has to avoid this race here, because he's worked his way in the top 30 points, Jeff. And while a win is great, they can't get caught up in that. The most important thing is to come here and have a good day.
No question, but if you think about the role this team has been on, you know, he came back from the injuries, won the races, got himself in a chase to this point. He can still fall out, but he's got himself into this point. This is the kind of timing you want to have going to a racetrack that's not been good to you, you've not had success on. This is, you have to look at this and say, we're going to conquer this. We're running well. Things are going our way. This is our opportunity, and go take advantage of it. We know he can drive the race car, okay? But you hear him talk about this racetrack. He does not like it. He's not had success. But the timing is right to beat that. And listen, while we're talking, Sam Hornish in the 9 car, he just went to 10th fastest. Good run for those guys.
Very good.
His teammate, Eric Almirola, has been able to get back in the car for at least a lap or two after being under the weather earlier. Are continuing here on NBCSN and NBC Live Extra. Coming up next, Xfinity Series practice from Mid-Ohio, then their final practice will follow at 3 o'clock. At 5 o'clock, we'll set the field for Sunday's race with Sprint Cup Series qualifying, and at 7 o'clock, it's NASCAR America. Guys wanting that one last qualifying run, that mock qualifying run. You see them lined up, but the time is running out. One guy who went out and put a very impressive lap down was Austin Dillon in that 3. He is second quickest again.
Riding along with Greg Biffle, you hear him out of the throttle. That's, with this package, you just need to be close to wide open. We rode along with Carl Edwards earlier. He was barely ever out of the throttle. So if you hear them getting out of the throttle, Jeff, that's just going to be way too much for a qualifying run.
And he was coming to get the green. He had just left pit road, and especially in that situation, you would think he'd be able to run wide open for sure because he doesn't have the speed that the other guys have. You can hear how much he's out of the throttle compared to what we've ridden along with the other guys.
And he's going to bring it in.
Wow, that was really hard to drive right there. I didn't have any tape on it.
Oh.
Didn't have any tape on it.
With 3 minutes to go in practice, that's not what the crew chief wants to hear from the driver. Really hard to drive.
Well, then that's not what the driver wants to hear from the crew chief is we didn't have any tape on it. Because if there wasn't any tape on it, I would say that was a mistake.
Mike.
Well, guys, one guy you always expect to be among the contenders each race weekend is Jimmy Johnson in the 48 team. But so far in this practice, they've been a bit frustrated, looking for speed since the onset. They didn't find it once they went to qualifying trim. Jimmy said it was much better on fresh tires, but Chad Knaus seemed a little bit disappointed, saying we're still about a half second off. They stopped practice about 7 minutes ago, which I thought was a little interesting because most other teams out here were still trying to get as much speed out of their cars, trying to make as many runs as possible. It seemed like they both, Chad and Jimmy, retreated to their transporter, trying to put their heads together, trying to come up with an idea, a plan that might give them the speed they're looking for. It appears right now as the team makes adjustments on the race car, they may be considering a rear gear change, but certainly Chad Knaus and the 48 team not happy with where they stand right now.
Well, what happens, Mike, is even though this practice goes for a few more minutes, you have to be in an inspection line for qualifying soon after. You only have usually 45 minutes to an hour to present your car for inspection. So if you're very disappointed with your chassis, sometimes you just need to stop, go up in the garage or the trailer and come up with a great plan, because you don't have time to rebuild if you run all the way to the bitter end.
And once again, a little bit of a throwback paint scheme for the two. Brad Keselowski behind the wheel.
I'm sure that's
Rusty Wallace celebrating his 59th birthday, the Hall of Famer. And they are celebrating 25 years with Miller Genuine Draft. So you have the throwback paint scheme, black and gold. Brad Keselowski still looking for a win here in the Cup Series at Michigan. 21st quick in this session. Martin Truex Jr. on track. He has improved just a bit to 18th quickest with that lap that he just completed. Again, the qualifying will be in 2 rounds. So in the first round, you have to be top 12 if you want to advance and have a chance at winning the pole from Michigan. That's going to take place later this afternoon at 5 o'clock. Quite a bit further through the turn was the 88 on throttle.
Yeah, you just see the car moving around though and out of the gas. You just, I mean, it might not be a bad run, but to run to the top 2 or 3 speeds of Edwards, Harvick, and Austin Dillon, they are committed to the gas. There's no movement in the race car. Yeah, that lap for Dale Earnhardt Jr. is not better than the best one he's run today, a couple tenths off.
So the seconds wind down on this practice session. Again, it was approximately 2.5 hours that they were able to spend on track.
Real loose in the center of 1 and 2.
No rear grip.
Yeah, real loose at these kind of speeds is definitely not what you want. You know, when you have to stay in the gas this much, you'd rather be just a little bit tight than loose. When you're loose, you just cannot hustle the car like you need to. On the smaller tracks, when you don't have quite that speed, yeah, a little free is good. But at these kind of speeds, you'd rather feel that right front tire, know the rear tires are hooked up, and trust the back of the car. If you don't trust the back of the car, you will not be able to go as fast as you need to go.
And I think Austin Dillon, 3rd quickest in this session, has to be kind of the bright spot that we could see. Tony Stewart in the top 5 in this first practice session.
I think if you look at the top 10 here, you have Casey Kane. We just talked about the pressure mounting, needing to get a win, sitting here in 6th. David Reagan, a great run in 8th. You know, those guys are looking for wins. That's their way to punch the ticket in the chase. They have to win a race.
Yeah, 13th, Sam Hornish Jr. with a good run. 14th, Ryan Blaney, 2 guys with good runs. A.J. Allmendinger in 17th, also a good run.
He needs a bounce back. You know, he has Watkins Glen circled on his calendar. It didn't go like the 47 had wanted. Hopefully Michigan could be better.
Brad's got to be disappointed way down in 22nd. They got a lot of work to do. The 42 and 26th. For Paul Menard, you see him in 25th. So a lot of good teams. You got to find a way to get better.
Matt Crafton filling in for Eric Almirola in the 43. Eric a little bit under the weather.
And you see here Ricky Stenhouse Jr. does not want to be in the 30s with the speed of the 17 car. But we talked to Tommy Baldwin. You have the 7 and Alex Bowman. Decent run. You know, you got to remember, these guys back here trying to manage the resources they have, trying to make sure they're in the race.
You see Reed Sorensen in the 43rd. He's the car that's got to qualify in the top 36 if he wants to get in. If he cannot do that, he'll be the car that goes home.
And the 43 will make the field for Sunday's race. That qualifying will take place later this afternoon at 5 o'clock. So Carl Edwards posting a pretty impressive lap. Are we going to see a lot of guys try to go flat foot around here?
I think you're going to have to go flat foot. Just remember, Carl Edwards, when qualifying was over Indianapolis, the last time we ran this high drag package, Carl Edwards was on the pole. Maybe we're seeing that again here in Michigan.
And if you couldn't run wide open in practice, how are you going to do it in qualifying? A lot of nervous drivers over the next several minutes.
Coming up next on NBCSN, Xfinity Series practice from Mid-Ohio.